Winston Churchill once said, "Perfection is the enemy of progress." On today's Lessons from the Tank podcast, I am here with Howie Busch from Dude Robe, and he's going to talk to us about how he had to make sure that he didn't allow perfection to get in the way of good enough. This is going to be an amazing, amazing episode for you to watch if you're just getting started off and you are trying to make sure that everything is perfect. Sometimes you just got to get started. Enjoy. Howie, thank you so much for being part of the podcast. Man, we're going to have a blast today. So how are things going?
Things are great. Thanks for having me, Joe. Great to see you.
So tell us a little bit about Dude Robe and your experience on the tank. And then we'll talk about some of the behind the scenes stuff, because I could tell just from watching it that there was some creative editing happening there that didn't tell the full story. But tell us a little bit about your product.
Well, I created Dude Robe, which was I wanted to disrupt the robe space. I came up with an idea or I noticed something, a lack of something. I am not a bathrobe wearing guy. I'm like, but what would I wear? Like I would see my wife in a robe. She looked all comfortable. And I created a cooler robe for guys like me who want to wear something that's not like that old fashioned bathrobe. Because to be honest with you, it hasn't changed much in hundreds of years. And frankly, I would say it's not dissimilar to what you did, right? Like both businesses, window screens, hadn't changed in how long?
Over 100 years.
Yeah, and I say the same thing about bathrobes. So our products, which can't be more different, are more similar than we think.
Yeah, find something that has a problem. Guys don't like wearing robes, and then try to fix it. So now you some other things that we have in common. You had an experience a lot like I did with Shark Tank, reaching out and asking you to come on the show through a tweet, right? Is that how it happened?
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. And I was reading up on your stuff also, and it's very interesting because it was similar. We're not the only ones, obviously, that's happened to, but more often than not, people apply and audition and try several times before they get on. We were lucky that they reached out to us. But I remember getting this direct message on Twitter, and I'm not saying, let's go, what was it, 5 years ago, 4 years ago and change. And I was a week into my company, much like you. I thought someone was messing with me because it said, "I'm the head of casting of Shark Tank. I love it. Let's talk." I'm like, okay, right. The head of casting, sure. And then I looked it up, and sure enough, it was Mindy, who's the head of casting and is awesome. And it was, but being a week into my company, I'm like, all right, this is kind of crazy, right? And sure enough, that's how I started the process to go from there.
I read a statistic over the weekend that said that getting on Shark Tank is actually more difficult than getting into Harvard Business School. Was that maybe something that you wrote or something that maybe you had shared in an article?
I did some math on it, is because they told us my year, and I don't know what yours was, but they said basically if you get on, 40,000 people apply and only, let's say, 100 will air. So that's 1/4%. That's the math I did to get into Harvard, not business school, but Harvard. 5% get in. So it's 20 times harder than getting into Harvard, right?
See, now I can tell my mom. See, I didn't get into Harvard, but at least I got on Shark Tank. So there
What's
you go.
harder? What's harder to do?
So again, I could tell from knowing some of the background and how they do edits. You didn't get a deal, but you were so new into the space that you didn't have a lot of time to really understand, how you could grow and stuff like that. So again, to your point, you started your company a week before you recorded. So tell us a little bit about that.
No, not before I recorded. I was 3 months in when I recorded. So I was
gotcha.
in when she reached out to me.
When she reached out. Gotcha.
Right. And I guess I would say I went there thinking I was 25% likely to get a deal, 75% unlikely, because I knew I was so new. All I had was Kickstarter sales. My goods weren't even in the country yet. I didn't even have enough samples for them because I had my factory make more samples. So I had enough for all the sharks and everything. I didn't like them. So I
Mhm.
didn't want them touching samples that I didn't like, and I only had my original samples. That's all I could give, and there were 4 pieces, so only 4. And of course, Damon is the one who didn't get it, and so they had a comment about that. But I get it, and I'll tell you what was interesting was you go on, and I don't know if you had this experience when you go on, you're there, and a lot happens, and then afterwards you're replaying in your head. You're like, well,
Oh
why
yeah.
didn't I say this? Why didn't I do that? And I had a bunch of things like that, and and I kept they kept talking over each other, and it was hard to get in a word edgewise. And so I I wanted to tell them. I kept saying, "Well, let me explain my valuation," because someone asked it, and then they kept fighting about it.
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Well, let me explain it to you." I said it 3 times. I don't know how many was on in air. I said at least 3 times, and they never. I was never able to get it in. And after I said, I realized, I'm like, if I just phrased it differently, if I said, let me tell you how many get to $1 million in sales, they would have shut up and listened,
Right.
right? Me just keep saying, so it's how you phrase it to make them, it's all those things that you think back after the fact of, oh, I could have done that to change the dynamic a little bit.
Yeah, and uh, again, some of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that they do talk over each other. That this is real. Like they're not actors. They're not like taking their turns. They want to be heard and they want you to answer their questions. I tell people all the time, it was the weirdest experience to be, talking, saying an answer to a question, listening to another question while you're trying to formulate an answer to another question, all while going, "Am I really freaking here on Shark Tank doing this?" It's like
Yeah.
this huge out of body experience that happened to me anyway. But
I was going to say exactly those words, out of body, but I'll tell you, for me, it was kind of interesting. It was very surreal. I didn't enjoy the first 90 seconds, which is that, your opening, right?
right.
That pitch, because it's memorized. And so I was the most nervous for that. When I delivered that in like rehearsals, the
Yep.
2 days before that you do the rehearsals, I basically, and you're delivering it not to the sharks. I don't know what people know and what they don't know, but you're delivering it to producers and directors and whatever. I basically got a standing ovation. Like, it was close, and I'm not joking. It was like they were like, "That's perfect." And when I do my pitch, every time I did my pitch, I would have, like, there were one of 3 areas where I would stumble for a second,
Hmm.
and it would be fine, but I would always stumble. So I was nervous memorizing, because I don't like to memorize things. I would rather you and I just talk than me memorize anything.
Yep.
And so I do my pitch in the rehearsal, standing ovation. I do my pitch that day, crickets. And I'm like, "Oh my God." And I realized after the fact, of course, that when I'm delivering it to the producers and directors, they're like theater people. They like the theater of it. The
Hmm.
sharks, they don't want the theater of it. They just want to know what's your business, okay, what's your space, what's a problem you're solving, if you're solving a problem, and what's your numbers, right? And what's the path?
Yep.
Um, but when I was standing up there talking to them, I did have the out of body experience, and my feeling was I'm really calm. Like this is so easy for me. I did not feel nervous at all when they were asking me questions and we were going back and forth. I had no nerves about that at all, which was kind of interesting.
It is because again, I think you and I are cut from the same cloth in a lot of ways. Because I had the same thing. Memorizing the pitch was terrible for me. I mean, I listened to myself all the
Torture.
way flying from Pittsburgh to LA. I had it in my headphones over and over and over again because I was so nervous about messing up. As soon
Yeah.
as it got to me just one on one, talking with them or 5 on 1, it did like a calm hit. It was like, oh, I know
Yeah.
this. This is now it's just me. So,
Right.
um, but again, you didn't get a deal mainly because you were so new. It was kind of uncharted territory. There's really not guy robes out there. That this is something new to the space. I mean, things are going well. I see you're on. There's a lot of places you can buy your stuff. I mean, how are things going?
Things going well. It's funny. Right away, I didn't, because I was so new. I didn't even know when I launched. So I started with a Kickstarter campaign. Then they
Hmm.
reached out to me, and my focus like after finishing my Kickstarter campaign or before I finished it, became immediately everything became Shark Tank focused to prepare for being on Shark Tank, right?
Yep.
So I didn't even know if I had a company yet. And when I put it up on Kickstarter, I ended up doing just under $70,000 on Kickstarter, just under 80,000 by the time I aired because of Indiegogo also. And I'm like, if I did at least 150, I had a company. If I only did like 50 or below, I didn't have a company. So I was in that gray area.
Yep.
And Shark Tank almost like pushed me, they didn't, being, going through that experience kind of pushes you to starting a company if you didn't have one already.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm waiting. And as you know, they tell you, you may air, you may not air. Like 2/3 of the people who film air, and 1/3 never air, whether they got a deal, didn't get a deal, because they can't have everybody getting a deal, of course,
Right.
right? They need both sides of that. And so when I came off the show, which was September, and my goods weren't in the country yet. I'm September to December. My goods came into the country in like early to mid December. During that time, I didn't know if I had a company or if I was just going to fulfill those orders and then go from there. A week, like just before January of that year, I got the call that I was going on. I'm like, all right, now I have a company. Now I got to go build a website. And I think I had mentioned to you, my website wasn't ready until an hour before airtime, which was crazy. So I wasn't built like you when you went on. You were already a company. You already had your website set up. You already knew you had your customer journey within your back end funnels and all of that stuff. I didn't. So I didn't, even though I got a lot of sales from Shark Tank,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have the capability of taking advantage of all that traffic that I was seeing. So for the next, like, I would say year and a half or so, business was fine. I did better on Amazon than my website. I would do a sale on Touch of Modern. I don't know if you're
Yep.
familiar with it, which is like cool guy stuff. I would sell out every time I did a deal there. But my own website, I couldn't get Facebook ads to convert, which is as a direct to consumer company, you need to. So I really wasn't dialed in there. But we had all sorts of cool things going on, like people liked the product. I had athletes, involvement. I had teams ordering, a bunch of NBA teams ordered for the locker room. And that was, to me, that was really cool. And I knew when I was getting the feedback that we really had something between the Touch of Modern and the athletes and the locker rooms. I knew we were onto something because we had so much positive feedback. Even though my sales, my website weren't there yet, we hadn't figured that out. And then last year we really dialed that in, and now things are, on a really, really good path.
Well, that's fantastic, and it kind of leads us to something that you and I want to talk about, which is figuring it out. As entrepreneurs, as people that are want to be entrepreneurs or business leaders, or maybe just in your own life, sometimes you don't have it all. You don't have a big checklist of hey, here's all the things I have to accomplish before I can do this thing. Sometimes it's just you have to get started. And your appearance on Shark Tank is, I mean, that's the perfect example of that. So, and you've also had some crazy experiences through your life that seem to be similar. I mean, you're an attorney, right? I mean, you didn't start off selling bathrobes, So,
I did not. It's funny you say that. During Shark Tank, when I was on there, uh, Cuban made a comment to me. He's like, because they go through your background and
yep,
whatever. And, as an attorney, as a sports agent, as somebody who I did Under Armour's first ever licensing deal, I helped Goldberg, the pro wrestler, get into wrestling. He was my football client. I used to do World Series of Poker deals. And Cuban looks at me, he goes, and now you're in the schmata business? He's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, you know what? Let's see what I'm doing. I got it's pretty cool. Um, and you're right. And I think, your point is very much of what I think. I know you think the same way. And a lot of our Shark Tank friends, a lot of people don't know about this, but we have our private Facebook group of these incredible Shark Tank community. What is it? There are like 600 of us in there
Yep.
or so. And we all help each other, but so many of us are like-minded in that we're probably not that smart in that in that we will just go do something. Like, you can't wait for the perfect time. You can't wait till it's whatever the product is, get it as good as you can, right? But don't let perfection get in your way, right? That to me is really important. Is you've got at a certain point you have to get it as good as it can, as good as you can get it, and then just get it out there. And then you'll figure it out over time whether you need to change something, whether it's on the product or on your marketing or your website, like I had to do. My website was not a great website when I started, but had I waited and people said to me, "Oh, why don't you defer your Shark Tank appearance?" I'm like, defer it. Like, what if my business is no longer? What if Shark Tank is no longer? Let's go. We'll figure it out. Yeah, I think a lot of entrepreneurs are waiting for they want it to be perfect, right? And be guaranteed of success and guaranteed that it'll work. And I think that is limiting. I think it really holds people back. At least entrepreneurs that I speak to.
Yeah, and you've done some product development and coaching and stuff like that with other entrepreneurs. Is this something that you do see a lot where people are that they get almost incapacitated with perfection? Is that pretty common?
Yeah, it's paralysis by analysis, right? I mean, and I see it the most. It's very interesting. The people who are the smartest are like probably like the engineers and people who like can I can't make anything. Like, to call myself an inventor or product developer is kind of an insult to inventors and product developers. A lot of them are engineers who can make things, and maybe you did with the window, can make things with their hands and do prototypes. I don't have that capability. And you know, the people who do, I think what they do is they keep, often enough that I've seen, they keep tinkering and tinkering and tinkering, because it's not perfect, it's not this, not that, and they want to get it perfect. And I think subconsciously it's a fear of failure, right? That, like, because if they put their baby out into the world and it gets rejected, I don't think there's a conscious thought. I think it's totally subconscious, and it gets rejected, well, then they wasted all their time and energy, and it wasn't loved and what have you. So they keep tinkering and tinkering and tinkering. And I've had when I had time to do the coaching, I would help people. And the engineers were the toughest for me to try and get them over that emotional hurdle of, you got to start making phone calls and you got to start putting this out there.
So the fear of failure, that's a great. I mean, maybe we can touch on that because you've been around a lot of professional athletes and stuff like that through your history. Again, I feel that there are amazing people that have the gifts to be professional or to do it, and something subconsciously gets in their way. And I do feel that a fear of failure a lot of times, that unwillingness to put yourself out there, is a big hurdle for people to overcome. And it doesn't matter if it's in the business space or athletics or anything else. Do you find that to be the case?
I do. I mean, I think I've seen it less athletically. Like, when you're dealing with professional athletes, of course, there are different degrees of that, but I didn't encounter that. But certainly in the business world, eh, but what people when they think about it, they're like, well, I don't have a fear of failure. Of course you don't. Like, you don't think you do, and you don't realize what you're doing to sabotage yourself from going forward, to put it out there to see if it fails or succeeds, right? Like, you have to be willing to get it to be the best you can and get it out there and do whatever you can to make it succeed. But it is that it ultimately becomes, it comes down to fear of failure and fear of embarrassment and whatever, even though people don't give enough credit to the fact that it's subconscious. They don't realize they're thinking that. They don't think they're thinking that it's a fear of failure, but their actions say otherwise.
Yeah, even I've talked with some people, business owners that have come to the end of their cycle in that business for whatever reason, right? So again, it's just the business isn't working, or it's a strain on their lives, and you can tell from the outside. You can outside looking in, you go, you need to get out of this. And you know the thing that I hear, what will people think? That I hear that so many times. Like I've done so much with this over the past 5, 10, 20 years. What will people think if I close it down? Like, how much does that really matter to you? And again, it's a subconscious thing. They just can't get past it.
You know, I do think a lot of people have that. I can't tell you that I'm immune to that thinking ever, right? Like when you, especially for businesses like ours, and yours is different from mine in that yours was a successful business before you went on Shark Tank. But for businesses that you are basically, we're on the world stage. When I say world stage, not that everybody knows Dude Robe or FlexScreen or any of our friends' businesses, but it's very public. So we're really putting it out there, right? Like there is, if anyone should have a fear of failure, it's us because, and I can't tell you I'm immune from it. Like I don't want, like I have friends, right? If you run into people you haven't seen in years, old college friends, they're like, you're still doing Dude Robe? And I'm like, yeah, I'm still doing Dude Robe. And everyone would have given me a pass. It's pretty interesting. I didn't think of this until you just asked it like that. No one cares if I close it down or don't do it. They want me to be successful, but nobody cares if I shut it down. It's my own ego that gets in the way of me saying, I want to prove that it was overly successful and you know, show the sharks that they were wrong or this or that. But we all give too much credit to what other people really think. They're busy with their own lives. They're not really thinking about whether ours succeeds or not. They just want us to be happy and do well. They're not worried about whether it's his Dude Robe or FlexScreen or, you know, if I'm doing something else as a lawyer. You know, nobody really cares.
You know, it's really funny. My grandmother used to tell me back when I was little, you know, hey, I have really good news for you. The world doesn't revolve around Joe. And again, you don't understand the wisdom of that until you get into your 40s, 50s, 60s, you know, as you get a little bit older. And you do start to realize that, you know what, my neighbors could care less about my success or failure. You know what I mean? There's very few people in the world that really are keeping their eyes on you. And typically they're the people in your closest circle. And you know, if they are going to secretly hope that you fail or celebrate your failure or something like that, then man, you need new friends or new family or whatever the case may be.
But you know, what's funny about that? Some people are just wired that way. Some people are just wired to be negative, and they don't even realize. I think it's so much of this is subconscious. They don't even realize they're wishing you bad. You know what I mean? They're secretly rooting against you, maybe because they have things going on in their own life. But if you ask them, they would never realize that they are doing that. It's really interesting. Psychology is really interesting around that whole, you know, whether it's jealousy or whatever it is, right? Like it's kind of more, it's more out there than you think, like of people being like kind of haters, you know?
And social media has compounded it terribly. You know, now that we put ourselves out there, and you know, anonymously, again, to your point, we are on the world stage. Again, however you want to look at that, you know, so people make comments on social media and stuff, but people that I will never, ever, ever meet, and you know, you just have to say, oh well, you know, okay, so you don't like my product, you know, you think my baby's ugly. That's all right. I still think it's pretty cute, and other people do too. So I'm going to go out there and keep doing what I do.
I find those things so strange to me that someone takes the time and energy to make such a negative and often like nasty comment about someone else's business creation. It would just never occur to me to do that. And by the way, the irony is, and the whole thing is, once they do that, they're going to see more and more of it because that's how Facebook and Google work. once you interact with it, now you're in that loop,
Yeah, it is so funny, but and to the original point of getting rid of the fear of failure. Man, see there I'm failing all over. I can't even say the words, but that's something that you as an entrepreneur, or talking to the listeners, you really have to, if that's so big in you, you might want to just go get a job. And I don't mean that to sound, that's a negative in any way, because there's nothing wrong with having a good career. But being an entrepreneur and being a business leader, you have to put yourself out there at some point. You have to put your business out there at some point. And it's not going to be perfect, and you're going to pivot throughout that experience. But you have to do it anyway.
Right, right. It's very interesting. You talk about pivoting. I'm going to give you, I'll try and make it quick example of kind of like what was going on with Dude Robe. When Dude Robe wasn't working, meaning my website wasn't,
Yep.
I wasn't like, my conversion was low, and I didn't have all of my funnels tied in, like my email wasn't, not everything was working in sync together. And so my current version of Dude Robe, which is the one that's out there, it's like a cooler robe. But that's hard to show in marketing, right? And frankly, that was Cuban's point. Cuban, she said, when I feel this and I touch it, I get it. I feel the difference. I see the difference. He goes, but how are you going to show that from an e-commerce perspective, direct to consumer?
Mm-hmm.
And, it was pretty prophetic for the first, I don't know, let's call it year and a half or so. And then, so I decided, in terms of, you talk about you have to pivot as you see what's going on. I decided, you know what? It makes sense. It's hard to show this. I need to come up with something that has benefits to it, like actual benefits, as opposed to just looking different and being cooler, right? Yes, we have better cuffs for your sleeves. It's more like a hoodie. Yes, the belt is permanently attached. We do have benefits to it, but that's tough to show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so so I sourced these technical fabrics that actually have recovery benefits to it, have skin benefits, have temperature control. And that was where decided I was taking my business. So I've been sourcing it, I've been prototyping that. This is all literally going on right now. And a funny thing happened. Over the course of the past year, we dialed in our marketing much better, got the website to a better place to work with the Facebook ads, the Google ads, and the email flows and all of that. And version 1.0 saved its own life because it's really gone to another level, but we're still going to go forward with version 2.0. I thought it was going to replace 1.0. Now they're going to exist side by side. So to your point, you have to be willing to adapt, but as things are going on, you're taking in like real-time data and making decisions, which is really cool.
It is, and that's what I found in my company. My role has turned into decisions, vision and decisions more than a lot of the day-to-day work. Which is, again, I think that's an evolution of every company and every leader of a company, where you start. You can start compiling the data, and then you make your best guess. And by the way, for those of you that are listening, every single person, there is very few people that are so smart that they know the right thing to do as a business leader. We're just guessing. We just hope that we guess right more times than we guess wrong. But that's we're doing the best that we can with the information that we have, and we move our company in that direction. So,
but and you know what? It's such a great point, because if you guess wrong, and we've all guessed wrong,
oh yeah,
what's important to do is to be willing to pivot and do it quickly, right? Like that. You can't be paralyzed by, oh, that didn't work. You have to say, okay, that didn't work. What do we do now to make the best of that situation or extricate ourselves from that situation? And we all have to do it, right? It is those people who get, and I'm a lawyer, and so I'm pretty analytical. And at a certain point, I would have early on, I did have paralysis by analysis, right? I would like think it through and keep thinking it through and try and get it to be perfect and get the answer. Well, there is no the answer. You put it out there, you see what the public has to say, and you do the best you can with what you have.
Absolutely. So, man, this has been fantastic. So tell tell everybody where they can buy the coolest robe in the market right now. Your website, the best place. I know it's all over the place now, right?
Yeah, duderobe.com is the best place. We were just on Good Morning America, and it's crazy. Like so many of the things. The last thing I want to leave with. So duderobe.com is the best place to get it. That is sure. But keep an eye out, because we're talking about some really cool collaborations, and tying in my background as a former sports agent and whatever, deals with different athletes and entertainers. Like what drops and collabs are, right?
Yep.
And so normally that's reserved for cool things like hoodies and sneakers. Robes aren't cool enough to do that, but Dude Robe is. So we're working on some cool drops and collabs that we're going to do, and so I'm just really excited about taking it to the next level. But keep an eye out for us on duderobe.com.
Yeah, you have to tell me the first locker room interview where somebody's wearing a Dude Robe. You have to make sure you let me know, because I wanna check it out. So,
We're in the midst of doing something with a guy. Are you familiar? Do you follow UFC at all?
a little bit. Yep.
So there's a guy. So he was a champion. His name is Chris Weidman. He. You may have seen it on ESPN like a couple of months ago. He had a horrific injury, and like literally 12 seconds into the fight, he kicked somebody and shattered his leg when he threw the kick, and terrible, but great guy. And his agency had reached out to us, and he wanted a custom robe, which we do for athletes. Like I said, we've had teams order, we've had this, that, and so we're doing this whole campaign around not UFC, I shouldn't say that, around him and athletes, and what they wear to recover and chill, right? Because we look at it, and this is where we're taking the company. What they wear on the field, right?
Mm-hmm.
What they wear to, out and about in public. But what are they wearing when they're at home chilling and recovering? Because chilling and recovering is as important as going and, getting ready to compete.
Sure.
So that's kind of where we're heading with the company. And it's so you'll keep an eye. He'll be the first one to be donning it there.
That's awesome. Well, I'm really excited to see how Dude Robe evolves, and thank you so much for taking your time today. I think that anybody that's listening, man, get started. Get it good enough, get it the best that you can, and take that step forward and see what happens. Don't be afraid to fail. So thank you so much, Howie.
Amen.
Have a great day, and thank you again.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Lessons from the Tank. If you got value from today's podcast, we encourage you to subscribe to the podcast so you're notified when a new episode is posted. If you'd like to support our podcast, we encourage you to review it and share it with a friend. Thank you, and we'll see you on the next episode.